Welcome, everyone. I'm Sarah Brennis. I direct the Refugee and Immigrant Program here at the Advocates for Human Rights. Thank you for joining us tonight to learn about and raise funds to support immigrant rights. Our goal is to raise $25,000 tonight. We are near the end of what has been a long week, of a long month, of a long year in our community. Many of us felt the weight of the Derek Chauvin trial lifted on Tuesday when the jury issued its verdict, but acknowledged that it was only a wedge in accountability in a system that disproportionately leaves communities of color without meaningful protection or justice for systemic racism in the United States. We also need government accountability to safeguard the rights of immigrants. President Biden took office in January of this year with an ambitious goal to undo many of the anti-immigrant policies put in place by the Trump administration, as well as create a path forward to return the US to its commitment to a more humane immigration system. He and his whole team had their work cut out for them. The Trump administration made more than 1,000 policy changes to the immigration system during its 4 years in power, drove out compassionate civil servants carrying out immigration laws in the Department of Homeland Security, and created new roadblocks for domestic violence survivors and families seeking asylum through decisions issued by the Attorney General. During his first 90 days in office, President Biden issued a number of executive orders and policy memos aimed at halting, if not dismantling, some of these policies and restoring policies that fulfill the US treaty commitments to vulnerable global citizens. However, these efforts only hit the tip of the iceberg. Many of the regulatory changes require a notice and comment period that could take months or years, case laws not easily undone, and rebuilding staff at the Department of Homeland Security and organizational capacity at refugee resettlement agencies cannot be accomplished overnight. The changes the Biden administration has attempted include a number of provisions that have implications for asylum seekers, unaccompanied children, human trafficking survivors, and detained immigrants. Some of those changes have impacted 3 of our clients. How Biden's proposals make us more hopeful, and how we will continue to dream and advocate for even better policies that uphold the human rights principles that are at the core of our work. I'm joined tonight by 3 members of our legal staff who work alongside volunteers to navigate the complex web of immigration laws that have spun out of control during the last 4 years. Through their efforts, we have been able to steady the course for clients seeking a path to a more hopeful future. Kim Bashe joined our legal team last October and focuses their work on assisting non-detained asylum seekers and unaccompanied children. During its first 90 days, the Biden administration issued an executive order that aims to create a regional framework to address migration in North and Central America. The order includes setting up a task force to explore and address the root causes that have propelled Central Americans to find protection in the United States, and resume processing of asylum seekers at the US southern border by ending the Remain in Mexico process. The administration has also reopened US embassies in Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador for children to apply for refugee status through the Central American Minors Program. Initially implemented by the Obama administration, the CAM process allows some minors to apply for protection at US embassies in Central America. Ms. X is a minor who was able to utilize the program in 2016 when it was in place under President Obama. Kim will share her journey to highlight the merit in Biden's decision to resume the project, but also the limitations it creates for some of the youngest people seeking asylum protection. Kim?
Sorry, my internet cut out for a bit. Are you done, Sarah? Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Just to explain Miss X's story, the parents of a young child from Central America had temporary protected status here in the US. They left their young child with a relative who they trusted to take care of her. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. The aunt viewed the child as property and beat her frequently, stating that the girl was starting at the age of 3 years old. This aunt withheld food as punishment when housework wasn't done properly. She abused the child emotionally and really just made her feel worthless. And despite all of these traumatic experiences, the girl grew up, she grew older, and she developed a faith. And that faith gave her hope and strength. And unfortunately, that faith is what got her into trouble with local gangs who didn't like that faith. She eventually had to drop out of school because of issues with the gangs. When she was 13, her parents learned about the CAM program, which was established by the Obama administration in November of 2014. The program allowed lawfully present parents in the US to request refugee or parole status for their children who were still residing in these Central American countries. During its life, the program united 5,000 kids with their families in the United States. And during this process, an applicant goes through an in-depth refugee interview. At her interview, the girl was unable to disclose the abuse she had suffered because the aunt was present during that interview. Fortunately, she was granted parole status, allowing her to rejoin her parents in the United States. However, this parole status is only temporary, and it would not put the child on a path to permanent status. It wouldn't allow her to get access to all the social services necessary for her to thrive. Fortunately, the advocates partnered with local agencies. We conducted legal screenings for the children who are paroled and assessed whether they might have viable asylum claims. Upon arrival, the child received resettlement services from the International Institute of Minnesota and also met with members of the Mitchell-Hamlin College of Law, who referred her to the advocates for help with her asylum application. The case was placed with a pro bono attorney, Carmet Bullman, her first one, and the advocates helped find an expert, assisted with collating briefing materials, and supported Carmet in her representation of the child at the interview. In April of 2021, just 5 years after she entered the US, the child learned that her asylum claim was granted. Now an adult, the child can start a new chapter in her life, and this one, she will hold the pen.
Thank you, Kim. As mentioned, President Biden is currently restarting the CAM program. Many parents whose children were left behind in their country of origin are drawing strength and hope from the prospect of reuniting their families. And yet, children who are not eligible to apply through this process are still faced with no other choice but to flee for safety. Over 30,000 children have been processed by Customs and Border Patrol officers at the southern border during the first 3 months of 2021. Many of these children will be released to sponsors or foster families in the upper Midwest. We need your help to recruit, train, and support pro bono lawyers like Harmeet to help us fight for these vulnerable populations. When the Biden administration took office, there was also a promise to relaunch the US Refugee Administration Program and begin accepting 125,000 refugees per year. Last week, we learned the administration backtracked on that goal, citing to the fact that the program and the agencies that carried out this mission had been gutted under the prior administration. Similarly, the Department of Homeland Security was left with vacancies after career professionals in the agency were driven out by anti-immigrant policies. While the previous administration purported to remain committed to combating human trafficking, key investigative agencies like the Department of Diplomatic Services and Homeland Security Investigations were left without experienced officers capable of investigating sensitive trafficking crimes. President Biden has appointed the former director of USCIS who implemented the DACA program to head the Department of Homeland Security, and a CBP director that is a proponent of community policing, has advocated for migrant farm workers, and stood by community members holding a Black Lives Matter sign during the unrest in Ferguson, Missouri. Time will tell whether these appointments will create a shift in the culture in how asylum seekers are processed at the southern border and how human trafficking survivors are identified and protected from future victimization. Staff Attorney Lindsay Greising works both on policy advocacy and supports our direct client services work on trafficking cases. She'll share insight into a young woman's experience seeking safety and highlight how critical it is to have policies and personnel that can identify red flags for trafficking in order to provide meaningful safety for those who have been victimized. Lindsay?
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Sarah. So I'm going to tell a story of one of our clients, and I think it's always helpful for us just to put ourselves in their shoes. So imagine that you are a young mother taking care of your child. You dream of the future that you will have together. Then the unthinkable happens. You are attacked by the police because of your ethnicity and your brother's involvement in opposition politics. Someone tells you about an opportunity that can help you escape this threatening situation. This great opportunity will also provide you with a well-paying job so that they can send money back to your child and ensure a bright future for her. You borrow money from your neighbors to pay for the journey and required fees, and then entrust your life to this stranger. You land in the Middle East, a foreign place that you have no personal connections to and do not speak the language in. Upon arrival, your employer takes your passport and visa, which is tied to them. This family takes you to their home where you are forced to work day and night. You are beaten and threatened with deportation. When you ask for the promised money to send back home, you face further harms and backlash. They try to break your spirit, calling you for work whenever they see you on strategically placed cameras that you are sleeping or taking a shower. But you draw on your inner strength and resilience. They try to disorient you by moving you from family to family, but you are a survivor. You are strong. Eventually, a family takes you with them to the US on a visa tying you to them as a domestic worker. You are coached to lie at the consular interview, and your fear forbids you from seeking help there. They tell you that these lies will mean that you'll never be able to find help in the US. You will be completely dependent on their goodwill. They take your passport as soon as you get through the immigration line, where you again are too fearful to ask for help. You are kept locked in the rented family house in a country that is completely foreign to you. You are forced to take care of the entire family by yourself. Again, you don't get paid, get no rest, and face constant physical and mental harm. Finally, a dangerous but possible escape opportunity. You are asked to go shopping, accompanied by the family's child. Deep inside you, you know this is your opportunity to make your escape. You muster all your strength. You send the child back into the store for safety and then run away as fast as you can until you collapse. A friendly stranger calls for support, and you eventually hear a language you finally understand. You can tell your story and ask for safety. The police are called. You fear that you'll be deported to your country of origin where you face persecution or death, or that you will be returned to the horrible family that trafficked you. But neither happens. To your surprise, the police take you to get your personal items from the family, and then they take you to a shelter. Though, to your disappointment, the police do not arrest this family. Nonetheless, you feel safe for the first time in years. The shelter connects you to the advocates. A staff member listens to your journey and begins to help you apply for safety. After more than 2 years, you learn that you have been granted asylum and a T visa as a victim of trafficking. You are guaranteed eligible to remain safely in the US with the ability to apply for permanent residence and work. You can find a job without exploitation. You can send money home to your child and begin living without fear, learning English and accessing support services. Most crucially of all, you can also apply to have your daughter join you here.
Thank you, Lindsay. Family reunification is often a long-term goal for many of our clients. Unfortunately, immigration detention, whether it be at the border or the interior, repeatedly tears families apart. During its first 90 days, the Biden administration set up a task force to reunify the remaining children stripped from their parents under the Trump administration's family separation policy. This has not stopped the policy of separating individuals considered children under immigration law from their parents when arriving at the southern border, however. The Biden administration has also attempted changes surrounding immigration detention and removal in the interior. During his first days in office, President Biden issued a moratorium on removals, only to have it blocked by a judge in Texas. The administration also revoked a Trump administration order prioritizing almost all undocumented immigrants, replacing it with 2 memos setting the new administration enforcement priorities. The first memo only prioritized individuals in 3 categories: those suspected of terrorism or espionage, those who have committed aggravated felonies, and those who enter the United States after November 1st, 2020. A more recent ICE memo walked back these narrow priorities and allowed enforcement and deportation of individuals outside of these categories with supervisor approval. Significantly, however, ICE officers are instructed to weigh the number and seriousness of criminal convictions and consider whether the threat to public safety can be addressed through other means, such as criminal law enforcement, public health, or civil authorities at the state and local level. Though we've seen the number of immigrants in detention decline in the past several months, we must remain vigilant and prepared to represent those facing removal while behind bars. The priorities that do not require or prohibit the arrest, detention, or removal of any non-citizen, leaving much discretion in the hands of ICE officials. Staff Attorney Hannah Sanderson provides representation to clients in immigration detention. She will share the experience of some of her clients who have lived through the harsh realities of ICE detention, both in terms of their detention, as well as long fights on appeal to preserve their ability to be released from immigration custody and safely remain in the United States. Hannah?
Thank you. I want to start by saying how grateful I am for the opportunity to, along with our dedicated volunteers, represent some of the most vulnerable immigrants impacted by our unjust, racist, and unpredictable immigration system. The previous administration did incalculable harm to our immigration system, to America's claim as a human rights beacon, and most importantly, to individuals and families who were forced to interact with this system in the past 4 years. But I will also say that one silver lining of those horrifying policies is the light they have shone on an already broken system. Throughout its decades of work, the Advocates has only ever been able to provide limited assistance to asylum seekers in detention. In many circles, the actions of the past administration created increased attention on and empathy for immigrants and detained immigrants in particular. And you all have responded to the hatred with generosity. Because of grants from cities and counties and through generous private donations, our limited assistance for detained immigrants has turned into 2 full-time attorneys and a staff person dedicated to support and work with pro bono lawyers on detained work. With the incredible help of these volunteer attorneys, John Bruning and I are able to represent detained immigrants throughout their entire proceedings, in court, on appeal, and advocating for their release through parole, bond, and federal habeas corpus petitions. The reality is that without a lawyer, many of our clients would have been deported. The reason for swift deportation is ICE's target on the most vulnerable for immigration enforcement and detention. As we've seen in stark reality this year, the criminal legal system in America is rife with systemic racism and injustice. Our Black and Latinx and Asian clients are far more likely to be caught in the criminal legal system. And our healthcare system leaves much to be desired too. Many of my clients face the trifecta of mental health challenges, criminal proceedings, and deportation proceedings. I'm happy to report that one of my longest standing clients was just released this week after more than 18 months in ICE detention. He fled West Africa during the Ebola crisis and feared going back even after Ebola because he would be forced to become the chief of his tribe. His father and his brother, the 2 previous chiefs, were brutally murdered by the government when they refused to hand over their tribal land to foreign palm oil companies. My client was next in line and afraid for his life. The job was compulsory. My client also struggles with mental illness. Unfortunately, when temporary protective status given during the Ebola pandemic ended, my client was left here undocumented. It meant he couldn't get treatment for his schizophrenia. He couldn't work. He couldn't access social services. And he had nowhere to turn when his roommate beat him with a pipe over rent money, leaving him with a traumatic brain injury that only exacerbated his schizophrenia. He ended up entangled in the criminal legal system, which in turn sent him down the pipeline into ICE detention. I represented this client in immigration court, and with the help of a volunteer at the U of M who did a diagnostic mental health examination, we won protection under the Convention Against Torture, which we call CAT, for my client. Unfortunately, as is almost inevitable under the previous administration, the Department of Homeland Security appealed the decision. And because they also have control over his custody, decided not to release him from jail while they fought his win. But we kept fighting. We worked with an all-star team from a local law firm to represent the client on appeal. After several months, the Board of Immigration Appeals decided the judge needed to clarify her decision on a few points, so they sent the case back. Again, we worked with the volunteer team to present the case to the judge, who again granted CAT. The government appealed again and refused to release him again. The volunteer team again represented him on appeal, and this time he won. Because of the new administration and their change in policy on who is a priority for detention, they released my client right away, whereas under the prior administration, he likely would have been kept another 90 days. What this story omits is all the extra work our team did to continue fighting for our client's release. 18 months is an incredibly long time to stay in jail for a civil reason, and ICE did not have to hold him. They didn't have to hold him there when the COVID-19 pandemic hit and the jail became an incredible super spreader liability. They didn't have to hold him there after the federal court told ICE to release people with underlying health conditions like him when they couldn't guarantee his safety from COVID-19. The client is immunocompromised and he should have been released. We petitioned to ICE several times and eventually, again with our volunteer team, filed a federal lawsuit called habeas corpus, asking the federal court to order him released, or at least give him the opportunity to present his request to a judge, which he hadn't had. To represent our clients zealously and effectively in an incredibly unjust system, we need every tool in the toolbox. We're so thankful for our amazing pro bono attorneys who get down in the trenches with us and make these wins possible. We're grateful this client will sleep in freedom tonight, wear clothes of his choosing, and eat food of his liking for the first time in a year and a half. We look forward to a new administration that's already implemented some changes and promises to do more, but we know that incremental changes will not fix this fundamentally broken system. We know the work will continue, even if it looks different than it did a year ago. People remain in detention and they're deported every day. Both detention and deportation are damaging and sometimes permanent forms of family separation. We're thankful for our amazing supporters who give their time and financial support so generously, and we thank you for continuing to work with us as we enter this new chapter.
Thank you, Hannah. I was in the office today when the client came in as well, and it was just so, it's always so exciting to see clients when they've gotten a win and just almost unrecognizable because the weight is lifted off their shoulders. As Hannah pointed out, the advocate staff helps train and support volunteer attorneys to handle cases that are often outside of their areas of expertise. Your financial contributions help us put new tools in the volunteers' toolboxes and maximize the impact we can have on the lives of the clients we serve and the communities in which they live. Dean Eiler is a volunteer attorney and partner at Lathrop GPM. Dean has represented over 20 different clients in their asylum claims pro bono through the advocates. In addition to donating hours of pro bono representation, Dean is a financial supporter and member of our board of directors. I will hand it over to Dean to say a few words before we close the program and invite you to join us in the breakout rooms. Dean?
Thank you, Sarah, and thanks everyone for being here tonight. I'm really glad to be here tonight for this event. I have been on the board at the Advocates now for a couple of years, and I've been volunteering to represent asylum seekers for more than 15 years. Obviously, here in Minnesota in the last week or so, we've all been focused on something else. We've been focused on the Chauvin murder trial. And there's so much we can learn from that. There's so much to talk about or to think about that. But there are a few things that really struck me that I think are important and relevant for our discussion tonight. The first one is it's a reminder of maybe something that's obvious, but something we need to be reminded of, and that's that justice really matters. It really matters to people. It makes a huge difference in their lives. It doesn't fix everything. It doesn't bring back lost lives. It doesn't solve ongoing structural problems that we know are continue to be issues. But when you see the family of someone like we all got to watch celebrate with the verdict, you know that it really matters. When you see people in the streets that are crying, and I remember one person in particular who I overheard say that, you know, this makes me feel like my life matters, that I've been heard. Those kind of things come with a moment of justice. It really matters and really makes a big difference in people's lives. The second thing that really jumped out and I think is so important is the role of bystanders. We've seen how absolutely critically important that was. That heroic young woman, Darnella Frazier, stopped and filmed what she saw. She and others were horrified that they couldn't do more, but they could have just kept walking. They could have gone on to do whatever else it was that they were doing. They stopped and they did what they could, and they later bore witness at the trial. And what they did played an absolutely critical role in the result that took place. In a way, we are all like those bystanders. When we see or learn about terrible things or injustices, we have to choose. We have to choose whether we're going to keep going and just going in our busy lives, or if we're going to stop and do what we can. We can't do everything, but we can all do something. I know most of you know, and maybe all of you since you're here tonight, that this work that Sarah and others have been sharing about is so important for our clients and their lives. That's what this is all about. We've heard 3 of those stories tonight, and those stories, like many others, are just so powerful and moving. I've had the privilege of representing several people seeking asylum, and to see, for example, the asylum process helped several young women who were able to avoid forced marriages or female genital mutilation or continued domestic violence or other things that they were not able to escape in their home countries. Now they're free and they're safe. We've represented young people who got involved in the political process and did so peacefully in a way that sought change in their countries. And unfortunately, the result was that they were arrested and tortured and threatened. The folks that we represented, of course, were able to get away and escape, and through the asylum process found safety in this country. Beyond being important, this work is incredibly rewarding. I know many of you that I see here know that as well, or much better than I do. But being able to call a client and tell them that they've been granted asylum, and to experience, much, Sarah, like you referenced in another story today, to experience their relief, their joy, their appreciation. It's some of the most impactful and powerful experience that I've had in my professional career. As Sarah said, President Biden has issued a number of executive orders. There are changes happening in the immigration system, but we all know there is so much work left to be done. There is so much more to create a more just immigration system. So these are challenging times, but they're hopeful times. This is a moment where we feel the ability to make more change, not just to try and stop things, but to really make some more change. It's an exciting and a hopeful time in that way. But it requires each of us to step up, like those bystanders, as I said, and to do our part. There are many actions that each one of us can take. We can comment on proposed regulations. Many of us have done that, and there'll be more of that to do. We can reach out to our elected representatives and make them know about what we think, maybe urge them on, and give them a little more courage to move. We can monitor court proceedings like others of you have done in the immigration court system and other courts on behalf of everyone, to make sure that those systems are just and fair. We can volunteer and take the kind of cases that you've heard about tonight. Also, this is a fundraiser. So there's something else that we can do. And that is that what I'm going to ask you to contribute to tonight is to take action with a financial gift. Some of you may be here just having been invited to learn more about this work, and that's fantastic, and we appreciate you for being here and just maybe getting an introduction to more of this good work. But for the rest of us, I hope that you'll make a gift that is significant and important to you. As you've heard already once, our goal tonight is to raise $25,000 to be able to continue to provide the legal access to clients in situations like we've discussed. I will say I'm not particularly fond, or maybe even very good at asking for money in many situations, but it's a lot easier when you're doing it for an organization that you've been able to see and work with and know, with just amazing lawyers and staff that do such great work. They're such great stewards of the resources they get and use it for so much good. And so it just makes it a lot easier for me to directly ask you to make that contribution. I hope you'll join me and my wife Jennifer in helping us to reach that $25,000 goal this evening. Asylum seekers are 11 times more likely to be granted asylum if they have representation. Many of us have heard that, but I always find that to be an amazing statistic, 11 times more likely. That's another way in which we know that this work really makes a huge difference. And getting asylum allows people not only to have safety and security, but to sort of build or rebuild their lives for them and their families. Legal representation also makes a huge difference for detainees. We've heard a little bit about that work tonight, and their chances of being released on bond or being able to ultimately obtain legal status in the United States. We know it makes a huge difference in those cases as well. However, an asylum or detained case can take a long time and a lot of work to get resolved. Recruiting, training, and mentoring pro bono lawyers, which the folks here at the Advocates do, takes up to $8,000 to recruit and train each lawyer on average for these projects. That's a lot. And I know from my personal experience that those lawyers, the advocates, are incredible. They're incredibly helpful and make that money go a long ways in training a lot of people to work on these matters. I have the luxury of working in a larger firm, so I can work with teams of lawyers. But many of the folks that they train are solo practitioners. They're new lawyers, maybe they're retired lawyers who don't have those resources as well, and need perhaps even a little more support. And so I invite you to join us. Ask you to consider contributing $1,000 toward this legal representation of asylum seekers and detained immigrants. Donating is simple. There's many ways you can do it. You can text tonight and take care of that right away. You can text advocates to the number 243-725. Do that on your phone right now. Try it out. You can also obviously mail a check to the advocates, and you'll find other ways on their website to get the any donations you can make to them. Representing an unaccompanied minor can also be a long and complicated process. We've heard a little bit about that in one of the stories tonight. There's still hundreds of cases that are open from cases that the advocates have worked on and taken from the last several years, and they're bracing for the possibility and really the likelihood of many more new cases in the coming months. And so can you help us get ready? Can you help us prepare and be able to represent all those children? We ask that you consider doing that and do it tonight, and please be generous as much as you can. Again, you can text advocates to 243-725. Say that one more time, 243-725, and make a donation right away. Each dollar helps make a difference. We also have $5,000 in matching funds tonight. So the first $5,000 will be matched toward that $25,000 goal. Let's make the goal tonight. Let's get at least $25,000 for this excellent work. Each and every one of us, as I've said, has an opportunity to advance human rights, to take action by helping the advocates do the great work that they do. Let's make the Upper Midwest a place where every asylum seeker, every detained immigrant, every unaccompanied minor, every trafficking victim has access to legal representation so that we can help build a more just immigration system. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here tonight. And thank you for whatever you can do to contribute to this good work.
Thank you so much, Dean. Kim, Lindsay, Hannah, thanks so much for sharing more information about our work and helping the clients. Thank you, all the volunteers that contributed to those cases, and the clients who trusted us and trust our volunteers to fight for their ability to remain safely here in the U.S.